So we're Porter's Gin, and as you can see from the bottle shop, we've only been out since December, so we're pretty new. You can be excused for never trying us before, and you know there's probably 50 people here, so you're probably like one of the first 50 people to really drink it in Edinburgh. We actually are the distillers behind the gin. We started it up in Aberdeen, so myself, Josh, and this is my colleague Ben, and we actually make the gin, which sounds like such an amazing job, but it's actually quite a tough job to make gin. So yeah, we pretty much do everything. And there's just one person missing, which is Alex. He's the third person that founded Porter's. He is working in London at the moment, so he can't be with us. I'm going to pass over to Ben to introduce the first bit of today, and then I'll talk a bit again later, so enjoy.
Cool, thanks. Hi guys! So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the story behind Porter's and how it came to be. And it's not going to be too long, maybe about 15-20 minutes. And I'm also going to tell you about our distillation method, which is slightly different to some of the other gins out there. So I opened a bar in Aberdeen 6 years ago called Orchid. It's a cocktail bar. And when we opened, we had some really passionate young guys working with us, and we discussed making gin at the time. The type of gin that we discussed making was called bathtub gin. This is when you take your botanicals and you steep it in a neutral grain spirit. You leave them soak for a period of time so that alcohol can start to extract the essential oils out of the botanicals. Once you feel that it's been macerating for an adequate amount of time, you can then blend the different mixtures back together to make your gin recipe. So we discussed making a gin this way, but for us, we much prefer the more London dry style of gin, the clear gins and the slightly drier gins. So we kind of shelved the project. So this was about 6 years ago. Following on from that, a chap called Alex came to work for us. Now, Alex, he's not here today, but he's a really, really passionate young bartender. And he really wanted this piece of equipment called a rotary evaporator. Has anyone heard of a rotary evaporator before? Cool, awesome, one guy. All right, so I'll get into that. Thanks for support, all right. It's a bit of participation. So we got this piece of equipment called a rotary evaporator that Alex really wanted to get into our bar. And this was to allow us to start distilling within our bar. And the reason we were going to start distilling was for cocktails. We wanted to create innovative spirits for use in mixed drinks and in cocktails. So we got this piece of equipment in, and we started making some really interesting distillates, and some that were a bit crazy and a bit wacky. So one of them, which is a little bit out there, was a deep fried Mars bar distillate. So we literally went to the chip shop, bought a deep fried Mars bar, took it back to the bar, blended it with a bottle of vodka, and then redistilled it, and you're left with a crystal clear deep fried Mars bar distillate. Now this was really exciting and cool for us in cocktails, but this is when the light bulb moment went off again, and we thought we could actually start making a product again. The gin project could come back to life. And from that point on, we started to experiment a little bit with different botanicals. There's some of the traditional botanicals that are used in gin, and this is when Josh came on board as well, and we started distilling more in the bar. So the guy who sourced the equipment and also originally invested in our bar was called Professor Porter, and he's a university professor, a biomedical scientist at the University of Aberdeen, and that is why we gave him a nod and put his name on the front of our bottle of gin. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, if that's all right. Now, when we started to distill within the bar using the rotary evaporator, which I'm going to explain to you exactly what that is a bit at the next slide, what that's used for, it's used for distilling at low temperatures. So you distill under vacuum, and this means that you don't have to heat up your product in order for it to distill. Now, a lot of gins are made using a traditional copper pot still. Can I get a show of hands if anyone's heard of a traditional pot still? Cool, okay, so A pot still operates in a similar fashion to like how a kettle works in a sense. Apart from, well, you probably still flip a switch, and there's a heating element at the bottom of basically a bowl of a mixture of alcohol and water. It heats it up, and when alcohol hits its boiling point, it starts to evaporate. The vapor then rises, and it hits a condenser, which is a cooling element, and then the vapor collects, and you collect the liquid form at the end. So that's a very short way of how a copper pot still works. Now, when you heat up the copper pot still, the alcohol's boiling point is around 79 degrees. So you need to apply quite a lot of heat in order for the alcohol to start to rise. So what a rotary evaporator does is that it lowers the atmospheric pressure within the still, and by doing so, it allows you to distill at low temperatures. And this is great for like capturing raw flavors. So for example, mint, if you took a mint leaf and you put it in a pot of boiling water, you might notice that the mint will start to either discolor, start to wilt, or start to stew. So if you were then to taste that water afterwards, you wouldn't get like a really fresh flavor from the mint. You'd have like a stewed or cooked flavor. So by distilling at low temperatures, it allows us to capture like these fresh flavors, and we don't have to heat our product up or heat the botanicals up. So this is really good for like light, refreshing botanicals that are normally damaged by heat. Now, what we started doing, we started to like think about making our gin within this rotary evaporator and doing it all within that. But we quickly found out that yeah, this is good for like the light, refreshing ingredients, but in terms of the traditional ones, it sucks. Like the distillate that comes out is too light and refreshing, and it's not really punchy or bold enough to be able to pull through in mixed drinks, especially like even G&Ts or classic gin cocktails. So this is when we thought, you know what, we need to work with a pot still as well, because everything that we've done with our gin is done for a reason and a purpose, and there's no point in just making it all within the rotary evaporator if we knew that it didn't taste as good as it could. So we started to kind of to discuss like distilling part of our gin in the rotary evaporator and parts of it in a traditional pot still, and this led us to travel like all across the country, talking to different distillers about working with them to create porters. So essentially, I'll cut that part there, but essentially porters is a fusion of modern and traditional distillation techniques. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this piece of equipment and what it does. So this is your rotary evaporator, which no one has heard of in this room. And I'll talk you through how it works. So from right to left, on the right we have a recirculating chiller. So that controls the temperature of the spirally blue thing in the top left. So what we do is we keep that at a very, very low temperature. Just next to that on the left is the water bath, and the blue liquid in the flask, that is what, you know, our gin isn't blue, but if it was to be blue, that's where we would put it to start off with. So we steep our botanicals in a mixture of alcohol and water, and then we pop them in that flask and we lower them into the water bath. We set the water bath to, again, quite a low temperature so that it doesn't affect the ingredients that we're putting into the flask. And then what we do is we're going to hop over to the thing on the far left. This is a vacuum pump, and it's got a gauge on it as well, which controls the pressure within the flask system. So that vacuum pump on the left, it's got a tube that comes out of it, and it's attached in to the glass piece. You see, there's like kind of two pieces of glass that crisscross like that. So it basically just sucks air out of that system. And what it does is it lowers the atmospheric pressure within that system, which then in turn lowers the boiling point of alcohol, which then in turn allows us to distill at a low temperature. So we turn everything on and we leave it for a set period of time, and the alcohol starts to evaporate. It hits the spirally blue thing, and then it drops down into the other flask just below it. So does that make any sense? I mean, this is a lecture theatre, so I kind of feel like this is so I'm now going to hand back to Josh, and he's going to tell you a bit about the botanicals that we use.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I gave Ben the hard part to talk about it, so that's that. But it's quite simple, really. Yeah. So now it comes to like, what is the point of making the gin in the first place? Well, it was just to make a tasty gin, basically. And we experimented on a rotary evaporator with like hundreds of different botanicals and hundreds of different temperatures of each botanical. So it took us about a year and a half to actually create the recipe from when we decided to make porters. It took us like ages to make the gin, and we were almost going crazy at one point. So what we did was, we decided we need a goal, because you can't just, there's so many variables, there's so many botanicals, you can't make a good gin just by like throwing things in. So we decided to have a goal, and the goal was make a smooth, refreshing, citrusy gin. So that gave us like, you know, a narrower like kind of remit to go with. And we decided like, let's make a gin that if you line up like 10 London dry gins, we want to be able to taste porters amongst the 10 every time. And that was like one of our golden rules, like when we're doing this, that needs to happen. And I think we achieved it. Like, if you line us up in a blind tasting, you can pretty much identify which one's porters every time without question. And one of the ways we did that was the rotary evaporator being a lower temperature, so giving a more unique flavor. The other way was to have a unique citrus element in the gin. And that brings us to this yellow bad boy here called Buddha's Hand. Buddha's Hand is basically a citrus fruit, and it's one of the rarest citrus fruits that you can get, and it almost has no commercial purpose in Europe at all, because there's no juice inside the fruit at all. It's just peel and pith. So you can imagine your disappointment if you bought that, you know, in the supermarket. But for gin, since you only use the peel anyway, it was absolutely perfect. And it's got so many fingers on the Buddha's Hand, there's so much peel to use there. And we opened a bag of Buddha's Hand after ordering it from a guy called Bob's Son. And we smelled it and we were like, this is it. We need this fragrance in our gin. So then we had to go and actually source the Buddha's Hand. That's another whole story, and it was an absolute nightmare. And I can guarantee that if you go around, like after this when we let you free, go around and ask the other gins, nobody will source and actually import their own botanicals. It's completely counterintuitive, but we really, really wanted to get this Buddha's Hand. So we found a farm in China that grows it on a mass scale, and they use it in Chinese medicine, and so they thought we were a bit kind of crazy because they use it before it's too ripe, and we wanted it like yellow and ripe and flavoursome, and they were like, you're buying the bad stuff, you know, this is terrible quality. We were like, this is the one we want, this smells good. So we ordered it from them. We got 200 kilos of dried citrus peel, dried Buddha's Hand, which is a lot of dried peel. 200 kilos like fills up, you know, this entire area. And we got that over a container ship. And it was, unfortunately, because it was called dried Buddha's Hand, it was in emergency lockdown on the port. And that just kind of proves to us that, yeah, nobody else is importing this, you know? So that was great. That moves me on to the next thing, just to give you a bit of the background of the Buddha's Hand. But when we got it in, we tried the Buddha's Hand in different stills. So we tried it in the traditional copper still, and we tried it in our rotary evaporator. And it was at this point we were like, are we crazy, or does the rotary evaporator really make a difference? And we were like, please let it make a difference, otherwise we've just wasted like a year of research. So we went down to a distiller, a very famous distiller in Birmingham, and he calls himself, what, the maestro, or the nose, or something, and he's one of the UK's like most experienced distillers. We went down to him, and he said, what's that? That smells amazing. And we were like, that's the Buddha's Hand. He was like, Buddha's what? So he's never heard of it. And we said, we make it on a rotary evaporator, and he was like, what's that? he was like, yeah, I know that. He's like, I know there's all these new methods, but it doesn't really make a difference, you know. Just send us the ingredients, we'll make your gin for you, and then we'll, you know, charge you a price for it. And we were like, no, it definitely makes a difference. So we got it sent down to the copper still, and then we got it sent back up to us, just to make sure that this master distiller can actually make it on his still, and it is actually worse than the one that we made. So we got it up, and we're passing around the two. So one of them was made on the copper still, stewed at 80 degrees, and the other one was done on our beautiful Swiss rotary evaporator at 40 degrees. And we don't need to tell you which one's which. The one that jumps out and smells fresh is the one that we do ourselves, and the one that smells stewed is the one that was done on a traditional copper still by one of the UK's greatest distillers. So, you can make your mind up which one you prefer, but we definitely chose the best one out of the two, and that was it.